Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Only Land Fan Show. My name is Kendall Lejeune, and our guest today is Clint Turner. Clint Turner's company, Learn Land, has helped over 1,000 clients scale their land investing businesses. His Facebook group, Learn Land University, has grown to over 10,000 members. Clint spent the last 18 months exploring a controversial question. Is traditional land investing working anymore? His research led him to an overlooked gold mine in distressed acquisitions, where land investors' core skills could unlock opportunities others won't touch. Clint, thanks so much for joining us. How are you today?
I am doing great. I don't know if I sound that good.
You
Sound as
sound
good as you.
fantastic. 10 out of 10.
Watching you do that intro live, I would pay to see that again. So that was very good.
Well, maybe we'll do a special encore presentation on that. Hey, Clint, listen, I am so excited to have you back on the show. It's been a minute. So, today we're talking about the evolution of land investing and complex deals as competitive advantage. So, before we jump in, can you give us a little bit of a background of what led you to this question of whether or not traditional land flipping is even working anymore?
Yeah, that's a great question and has a simple answer as far as I'm concerned is was I making enough money doing it? Was the time in, money out equation working? And so there's no question that there's been some headwinds in the land investing market over the last couple years. And it was a good time in my life and it was a good season to really explore that and tinker with some things, shut some things down, start some things up, and really just put the first principles test to see is the business working like I want it to right now. Yeah. Hope that gives you a question. I'm excited to be back and to share what we've learned.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear it. I've been following your content for quite some time now, and it looks like you're ready to peel back the curtain and let us know what you've been up to in the last 18 months. And I talk to a lot of land investors, and they say the similar things that you're saying, that we've noticed that it's harder to get deals. Like our cost per deal is going up. Sometimes the cash conversion cycle is way, way longer than we are used to. And so talk to us a little bit about what has the tinkering process looked like for you in those 18 months. Sounds like you had your entrepreneur problem solver hat on. What were you playing with and what were you figuring out in those 18 months?
How do I remanufacture the returns? So I started in 2016 and I've always had a super simple investment thesis. It's I want to double my money in a deal. Like I'm not a super complex thinker. I just want to put money into a deal and I want to get two times that back. It's just been a guiding principle, if you will, to how do I deploy capital. And if you think about it, if you do, say you start with 25,000, okay, and you double it three, four, five, six, seven, 8 times. Okay. That's 8 years. So it's a long time. There's a lot of time horizon there, but that turns into serious wealth if you think about it from that perspective. And I didn't mean to. It's just how I started. It's just like what I was taught. And so I've always had, I don't know, I always feel like I deserve deals that have that kind of yield. And so as the business has grown and the market's changed, I've always wanted to keep coming back to that idea of if I have $1,000 in my bank account by the end of this year, I want to make it $2,000. I want to double my money every year. Right. And so when it comes to testing things, I want to see because I frankly I wasn't able to remanufacture those numbers. I saw those numbers for a long time, like 2016, 2017 to like 2021, 22. Great years, golden years. All right. We were doing well. And every time we did a deal, it seems like we were able to hit a benchmark number that got us close to doubling our money every year. Right. And a little breakdown on that is if you turn the same dollar two times in a year and you make 50% every time, that's still doubling your money. So there's a balance there. But I wanted to do that. And frankly, sending mail, sending text, sending voicemail, when you take up the cost, the time, and all the capital it takes to do the deals, it wasn't not working. It just, I was having trouble hitting those numbers. And so I wanted to come back and see maybe if I do more of this deal type, or if I try this deal type, or I cut the team back to look like this, how can I go remanufacture and get back to where we were able to do deals that were double your money type deals, if you will?
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, what types of deals did you start recognizing, okay, hey, I may be onto something here?
Yeah. So from 2020 to 2022, we were doing a lot of subdivides, minor developments, entitlements. It was just, it's like how I like to tell people is It's like when you're in, it's the saying, time in the market, not timing the market. Because I was a land investor and just got my teeth kicked in so many times and put myself in a good position, in those couple years, there was a really big arbitrage on some development opportunities. Just buying land, you could buy land on the market for 10,000 an acre and sell it as smaller lots for 20,000 an acre. There was a huge arbitrage for a couple years if you knew what you were doing. If you had the team and the infrastructure and the know-how and the market knowledge, you were able to do some serious deals. And the market always catches up. That's not going to run forever. And so that was the pivot, right? I was doing a lot of development and subdivide deals. And then in 2022, 2023, that market, really like 2023, that market just, I don't know why, I don't have the answers, but it just came to a halt. And so had to start looking at, is it flipping? Is it looking at more detailed lists? What was it that we could do with our time and energy to keep trying to generate those returns? And a little niche that we ended up in is like distress, right? You hear people talking about it. It's a social media like buzzword these days is distressed acquisitions. It's a bucket term. There's probably like 100 different types of distress you can face as a property owner or real estate owner. But that's the niche we got into. And when I look back at a lot of deals I did prior, just in the beginning of my career, a lot of the value actually was created through doing minor things that were able to help a property move along in the process. And so those seeds had always been there. And so we spent a lot of time really trying to figure out how do we find these property owners that are gridlocked, like they can't sell their properties and they really want to or need to. Because in a down market or in an average market, you want to like distress is where I think you have a lot of opportunity. So that's what we've been working on.
Calling all ambitious land flippers, ready to transform your business with proven systems and processes? Imagine this. One of my students recently closed 2 land deals and got another under contract in just 24 hours. That's the power of a well oiled land flipping machine. My exclusive coaching program is specifically designed for action takers just like you. We'll build out your entire operation from lead gen to dispo, implementing these systems on real deals from day one. But hurry, I'm only accepting 3 new students until 2025. If you've done deals, have a growth mindset, and are ready to scale, visit kindlecall.com now. Let's turn your land business into a consistent profit powerhouse. I love that. I love that. I've heard it often said that, especially when it comes to something like arbitrage in any type of business model, when you're arbitraging, you're really depending on the inefficiencies in the market. And so, as more people enter the market, as economic circumstances change, those markets become more efficient. And we now have to start pivoting as investors to find new horizons. So, it sounds like that's what you're doing. Can you talk a little bit about? Give us a case study. What does a distress deal, what could that look like? That way we can wrap our minds around the context of this before we dive into the nuts and bolts of how you did it.
Yeah, I think the simple way is does the property have an encumbrance? It's just a simple question. A property that has an encumbrance isn't going to make it through a traditional sale process, right? So if we have a property that has, let's just name a couple, okay? It has some sort of like ownership, heirship issue, okay? Grandpa died, will wasn't probated, something happened, and now there's a person on the deed who's dead, and the title company is trying to issue title policy, do all the traditional things. Not going to work. Okay. So that property is encumbered. Maybe there's things that are landlocked, deed restricted, tax lawsuits. Both taxes and tax lawsuits are two different buckets. General lawsuits, liens and judgments. There's all sorts of things that lead to a property being encumbered. And so I think the motivation at the end of the day when you're searching for these owners is you're searching for an encumbrance. And there's hundreds, or I don't know if there's hundreds, but there's probably at least 100, I would guess, different types of encumbrances. And so then it's just like any other problem, like you would in the land business. Where do I target? Where do I find the data? Where do I start going after those deals?
Yeah. So what I really like about this, Clint, is it's going after stuff that people may have seen, like your competition may have seen and said, I'm not going to touch it. Because I think that there's a prevalent streamlined thought that I've seen many land investors have. Not many, I'm not going to say many like top performers, but I've seen many land investors, especially beginners, some of the more novice land investors look at things and say, if it's got a problem, I don't want it. For some reason, we
Yeah.
like as a land community, people have decided, oh, deals should be easy. So I really like this idea of if you're going after something with distress or some type of encumbrance, it may mean that someone's looked at it and then they've decided they're not going after it anymore. So now you've got not only just low-hanging fruit, but fruit that has hit the ground and so much easier to pick up because no one's fighting over it.
And
So
they're easy to, yeah, they've been like the market has already educated them on the value and the issues, right?
yeah,
So they're more, I try to use fancy words sometimes and I can't remember them, but I believe that they are not as price sensitive as the general owner would be.
yeah.
They're, they just like, they don't know the solution. They're problem aware, they're not solution aware. And so that leads them to say, hey, I need somebody to fix my problem more as a determining factor than I need to get XYZ dollar amount for the property. Because Kendall called him and Kendall couldn't do it, and Frank called him and Ross called him and Mark called him, and they've signed all these contracts and all this stuff's happened and no one's bought the property. At some point, everybody did the hard work for us. And now if you
Yeah.
can get the thing across the finish line, there's more opportunity.
That is fantastic. Okay, what does this look like in a real world setting? Can you give us a case study, an example of a deal that you've done that fell into one of these encumbered columns?
Sure. I've told this story a lot. I can tell a lot of different stories, but this is the one that generally gets people most excited. We bought a industrial tract, just high level. We bought a piece of industrial land in Dallas, the Dallas zip code, like a 6 acres, beautiful area. It was just this prime deal. Bought it for 200K and sold it for 800K. That's like the high level of it, with very little other than putting the 200,000 in it. Like it was a pretty, it wasn't a straightforward deal, but that was it. It was that never touch the land, list it on the market and sell it. That was the largest spread I've created on a deal. There's another deal I want to highlight in the same category that we put, I think, $40,000 in trying to solve a problem and remove encumbrances. At the end of the day, we got 60,000 back. So we made a small return on it, but had lawsuits, we had airship issues, we had things involved. And so these deals are very unique. Like each one of them is very unique. But both of those deals had the same problem at the end of the day is that somebody died and they didn't have a clear succession plan. And in both of those deals, somebody died without a will, without a husband, and without children. That's a unique problem, right? That's a unique problem, but it's something that happens. And no will, no husband, no children means there's nowhere for the assets to flow. There's nowhere for her belongings to go. And so that is a specific type of encumbrance you could look for is people that have passed away with either very challenging lineages to solve or with no clear direct path of heirship. And so that was the problem in both of these deals. So somebody died and the interest in the property went back up through the family tree. It's called the intestate succession, but it goes back up to the family tree and out to the living heirs. So it goes up to her parents, out to her parents' siblings, and down those trees. And anybody who's living is going to get a fractional piece of that deal. It doesn't happen that often, and it often happens on properties that are less valuable because more valuable properties typically people like pay the attorney $2,000 to make sure this doesn't happen. But every now and then, and actually there's a lot more of those out there than you'd think. I could go off track for a long time, so I'm not going to. But both those deals look the same way. We had to figure out who, like what happened, right? We had to build a family tree, to put it very simply. What's the family tree from this person up and out through their lineage? We had to talk to family members. We had to confirm, like, is this really her mom's sister or is it is it her half sister? What is it? And that was the solution to both of those deals. One was a lot more difficult and made us 15 or 20 grand. And the other one was still difficult, but it made us 600,000. And so I think there's a lot of discrepancy you can see in these deals. There's another deal we're working on right now with an encumbrance that if we get it removed, it's going to take our projected profit from 250,000 to 750,000. So it's nice to have we got a good base level deal, but if we can remove an encumbrance that I really think we can, we're going to push the value of that property to 750 or the profit of that property. And here's the fun thing. That property was on market for 2 years. Anybody could have got that deal. And
Wow.
so there's all these different encumbrances. They often take They often look like if you're searching for them, airship issues, often that can be like flagged by unpaid taxes, right? Somebody dies, nobody knows who the property goes to. Year after year, taxes go unpaid. It generally means somebody forgot about the property, right? But there's all sorts of little ones, right? There's all sorts of little encumbrances. Like the last one I just told you, where we could create a bunch of value in a property. That's getting deed restrictions removed. So that's taking a property that's been deed restricted, and a bunch of people have looked at it and thought, oh, this makes a perfect subdivide, but it's deed restricted, so I can't do it. Understanding the nuance of how to enforce deed restrictions, they're unenforceable. And so we're going to be able to get them amended or completely voided, even, which is going to allow us to go to a smaller lot size, increase profits on a deal. And all
Yeah.
these things are encumbrances that lock the value of the property. Sometimes it's transactionally, sometimes it's like I just said, which is more procedural.
So good. So many different opportunities, it sounds like. So if someone's listening to this and they're used to doing the traditional flip model and they realize, yeah, I like Clint, you are singing my song, man. I can tell like things have slowed down in my business. I'm interested in this sort of distressed acquisitions approach. What would you say to someone who's just dipping their toe into the distressed property pool? Where could they go to find the types of encumbrances that would be uh, easier to get into and easier to work? I know these are probably all very case by case basis, but what would you suggest a beginner into the world of distressed acquisitions to start looking for these types of properties?
I'll do you one better. I'll tell you a county to go to. How's that?
Oh, even
Okay.
better. Even better. Everyone
Even
got your
better.
pins out.
There's so much, there's like so many opportunities in this space. It doesn't matter. And when I say that there are like unlimited, that's not fair. There are limited, but a ton more than I think this entire like niche of land investors could even make a dent in. Deals where you can make 10, 20, 30K. Okay. And that's great. And for a lot of people, that's amazing. Right. That's why I like it because there's a lot of those opportunities. I'm really interested in the ones that more zeros, right? The larger deals. And so that's why I say I can give an area away to you, like Harris County, Texas, where you could go live in. You could stay there and you could do 20, 30, 40,000 dollar deals forever. And here's why. They have really good public data access. So in the state of Texas and in a lot of states, when you have like a foreclosure, like a civil foreclosure on an asset because of unpaid taxes, it has to pass through like a legal proceeding, right? There's constitutional rights you have, so the government can't take your property. So they have to sue you for it and get access to it and sell it through due process. And they have to make the excess funds available to you. There's all sorts of stuff that goes on. But it has to go through a lawsuit. That's the important thing. And it's public
Mm.
record. Okay. So anything that's been like, if you go to a website right now, there's a couple of them, mvba.com, lgbs.com. These are law firms that represent most of the big counties in the state of Texas. That's like the two. And then there's a lot of small ones, but 80% of the stuff goes through them. They just post the tax sales every month on their websites. So it's not rocket science to find those. Those have competition though. If you go one step back and you look in the county records for properties that have tax foreclosures, you can find the stuff that goes on their website for auction 6, 12, 18 months before it actually goes on the website for auction because that's how long the lawsuits take, sometimes longer. And so there's a slew of these deals that are just like right under the nose. And there's so many of these things. Here's another one. Notice of defaults filed in public record. So if you can track public record, notice of default on a mortgage, it's like a civil procedural thing, at least in the state of Texas, that a mortgage trustee has to do before they can start the foreclosure process. We all know how to look up land records. If you can search for notice of default, that's often what is a pre-foreclosure list on PropStream or places like that. Is it's a public land record that's a notice of default, which is cool, but we wanted to go one step deeper. And so we really got into the court data, which is super messy and hard to make sense of. And that's where we found our niche, right? Is in the court data, looking for specific little triggers that indicate a property is encumbered in a way we might be able to help.
Mm. That's really good. That's really good. So, if someone's listening to this and okay, Clint, I have an idea of where I could be looking. I'm looking for these tax foreclosures, these notice of defaults, but do I have the skill set to do these messy deals? What types of advice would you give to those people in terms of the mindset piece around solving problems?
Yeah. Yes, you can. That's like where I go. I didn't know how to do any of, still don't know how to do a lot of the stuff that comes to us. Um, but there's generally case law or civil procedure that answers most of your questions. You're rarely going to find a problem that hasn't already been solved, right? So the question is, do you have to pay the attorney the first time to figure it out or not? Is how I think about it. So for the deed restrictions, like I had a hunch based on my title run and everything I'd looked at and looking at some neighboring properties, but I like didn't know. And I actually bought this property before I figured that out, which I probably should have done that backwards. But what I did is I went out and I routed my network and I found people who were like experts in restrictions, experts in encumbrances, that type of encumbrance at least. Found the people who represent the large home buyers that represent land developers in the area, interviewed a few of them, and they all gave me a pretty similar plan on how they would remove the restrictions. So I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know it was an opportunity, but I found an attorney or a professional who was able to help. The two deals we talked about at the beginning, 600K and 20K deal, those both had a very intense process of hunting down heirs, hunting down people who had a small fraction of the property. And so what I learned through those deals and that I try and use on all my deals now is that professional service provider is often a form of a private investigator. They have that tagline, they have that Google search. So you can find people. If I got like, I have a deal right now where we've got 12 heirs we're hunting down. At the beginning, my team and I, we hunted the heirs down. We got all their names and numbers from various websites. And if we couldn't get them, we'd call their mom or their kids or their ex-husband. Like we'd get to them. But there's people you pay for that. It's a private investigator. And so now a lot of the times when I'm underwriting a deal, and that's going to be the problem, it's how much is that private investigator going to cost goes into the underwriting of the deal.
Mm.
And so I say this to say there's a ton of encumbrances, probably unlimited because you can make them up and sue, like you could sue somebody for anything and say that they're encumbering your property. But as far as standard encumbrances go, there's a path generally to solve all of them, and it's normally through a professional, and that's the friction. It's that somebody owns the property, right? Talking to a lady right now. She's hoping we get this deal done. It's in an area I really like, but she owns 30 acres with a house on it. She's been through some stuff in her life. She hasn't paid her taxes in 5 years. The county's going to foreclose on it. And so either a lot of people don't know how to handle that deal or they just don't know how to negotiate it. So for her, we're going to break off 8 acres, buy it from her. It's going to help her pay the taxes. Makes sense for us to flip. It's a good deal, right? The encumbrance in that situation wasn't even something procedural. It's just that we needed to split off a piece of her land. That was the solution. Everybody else was like, buy the property, can't buy the property, title's messy, taxes are unpaid. But that's how we were able to solve that one. Came up with that on the fly. Didn't really know if we could do it or not. But I was like, what if we could buy a part of the property? You know? And so for most of these things, there's a legal expert or somebody that's going to help you along. For some of them, it's a little bit of just deal making. But I like to go with the old ask for forgiveness, not permission type deal, right? And
Yeah.
so if you can find these deals at low enough basis where it makes sense to take a little bit of a gamble, there hasn't been a problem we can't solve yet. It's often just how much is it going to cost to solve it?
So do you have a rule of thumb around where you need to be from an offer standpoint when you're evaluating these properties? Is it 50 cents on the dollar? Do you have something like that? I know these probably are all, again, very case
Hmm.
by case, but if you had to say rule of thumb where you need to be for a distressed property to absorb these costs of the professionals, private investigators, things like that, what would you say?
It's relative to the input. It's relative to how much it's going to take. And
Mm.
that is, we have a buy box we've built, but there's one axis that's management decision. It's
Yeah.
like how much brain that's one that's tough to quantify. You could probably
Yeah,
quantify it as billable attorney hours versus your hours or something. There's probably a metric for it,
sure.
but it's how much brain damage is it going to take? I will do all the brain damage to make 100K. Like I'll work hard to make 100K, but and I'd work really hard to make two or three or four or six.
Yeah,
It's less interesting to do all that work for 20.
for sure.
And the first few deals we did, I did it all the work for 5, 10, 20K.
Mm.
And so to answer your question, what's the I don't know how much brain damage will you take at the end of the day? It's just completely relative to how much money you can make.
Imagine having a complete toolkit for success right at your fingertips. That's exactly what you get with Only Land Fan School, our premium online community. For a low monthly fee, access our treasure trove of resources: the on market deals course, acquisitions tool suite, and Dispo Secrets library. Plus, connect with fellow flippers in our active community. Whether you're hunting for deals or closing sales, Only Land Fan School has you covered with step by step guidance and insider knowledge. Ready to supercharge your land flipping journey? Join Only Land Fan School at olfschool.com today. Yeah.
Right? And there's another small piece of there's like likelihood of success, right? Is there a statute that's very clear that says if everything goes to shit, I can hire an attorney and based on like civil law, they can remove the encumbrance. That's worst case. That's like the longest and the most expensive way to do it generally. But is that's a level of assuredness you have when you do a deal that if I can't get a deal done with so and because they're unreasonable, I always have this fallback that allows me to liquidate. It's a balance of like how safe do I feel in the deal? How much headache is it going to be? And how much money is it going to make? Right?
Mm.
I think maybe the fourth 4D axis could be how much money is it going to take? Right? Because I bought half of a house in Washington, D.C. for 15 grand. I don't know when I'll see it, but I know it's worth about 300K. And for them to get it through probate and sell it, they're going to need my 50%. It's a mess. I don't know if I'll see that money for a year or two or longer, probably like
Yeah.
potentially longer with how it's developing. But I bought 150K of equity for 15K. Seems like a good bet to have if it takes 1 year or 2 years or longer, right?
Yeah.
So it's super
Sure.
dependent on brain damage, money, and what's the likelihood we have of success.
Yeah, that's really good. Clint, let me ask you this question because this kind of popped in my head while you were talking about this deal with the lady with the house. That is really cool. I find it fascinating to hear like how you can structure like deal making is it's so creative that it's just the possibilities are endless, which is really cool. But when you were mentioning this lady had a house on the property, connected some dots for me. Default, like the notice of default with a mortgage. Are you finding that a lot of these notice of defaults with mortgages are connected to properties that have a house and acreage, or what are you saying around that?
Oh, yeah. I have been a land flipper for a long time. And in 2024, you could potentially call me a house flipper. So we bought and
Okay.
sold a lot of houses. Yeah. It's the same thing of you could look at an area like you and I could get on Zillow for pretty much any suburban area right now. And we could say, worst case scenario, this property will sell for this, as long as it's not like nuclear contaminated, whatever. And best case scenario to sell for this. And that might be a really wide margin. As long as we can buy a house where there's a good deal to be made on that very bottom margin, right? Then it's likely a good deal. And land, like there's rarely reason. It always surprises me in the land market. There's really not a lot of reason for there to be distress. People rarely have mortgages on land, so they have
Yeah.
like very little financial obligation. Like they use it. If you use it every 2 years and you pay $200 a year for it, feels like a good, oh, that was a great like weekend.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's always like I need to sell the land to get something. There's rarely an encumbrance, and they're generally physical. It's like landlocked or deed restricted or something to that effect, right?
Yeah.
When you have houses and mortgages, there's obligations that need to be made every month, and that's where things get a little dicey, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of houses and land that we've done. The industrial deal was burned down house and land, but still like part of a house there. That's actually how they found out this lady was like, or like that they needed to foreclose the property is the house burned down and they couldn't find the owner. They're like, where's the owner of this house? Oh, she died a
Wow.
few years ago. We need to foreclose on this property. So yeah, there's a lot of houses. The most amount of rehab we've done so far is like a trash out where we hired a junk company to go junk out and mow the yard. That's it. So treating it very similar to how we would with land. I'm not taking on any, I got to put $20 a square foot in it to get, or not do any of that. It's just a wholesale. It's taking it right from off market right to the market. And whatever it's worth at that moment is how we're valuing it.
Yeah, that's great. I've had this conversation with quite a few land investors that run from properties that have houses. They're like, ah, no, I'm not interested in a house. I don't want to deal with that. So when you're looking at these properties, are you looking for like a minimum lot size when you're looking at these notice of defaults? Like, I'm assuming you're not just going after properties that have a house that are on like a quarter acre lot, right? What's the minimum size you like to look for to say there's a land play here in this house situation?
I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble, but I've done plenty of houses on quarter acre lots.
Oh no, Clint.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I got a deal in escrow right now where I'm going to make $200,000.
Wow.
It's a house on a lot in a subdivision. It's
Yeah.
encumbered by a divorce and taxes and a mortgage. The encumbrances lead you to the deals. So I'm not searching any deal. Let me take that back. The encumbrance creates the list, right? So we're going to go search for a flag, notice a default, tax foreclosure lawsuit, delinquent taxes, dead owner, all sorts of things, right? Create your list. And that's your list, right? It's like, how do I find if you look for a subset of data, it's going to be very small. So if you took a list for a county and then you took it and you ran it through a skip trace service that gives you deceased as a filter, you might find that 2% of the name of record owners are deceased, or 1%, or half a percent, or 4%. I don't know. It's going to depend on your area, right? But if there's 100,000 properties, now there's only 4,000, right? And half of those people, they're just in the procedural process of taking care of the estate. So now you're down to 2,000, right? But there's 2,000 really good leads that all have their property encumbered and need your help to move it along.
Yeah.
So the encumbrance leads you down to the list, right? And then to answer your question, I'm filtering the list by value. I'm not filtering it by product type. Now listen, I look at the list, okay? The industrial deal, there was no fancy ranking algorithm. I saw it. I said 6 acres with a Dallas address? That's weird. Looked it up. Oh, we should probably look at this deal, right? There's a lot of value in this property. But the underlying thing with that property was it was worth a lot of money. It could have had a house on it for all I cared that somebody lived in. As long as it was worth that much money and there was motivation to get it done, I like it. Yeah, it's the encumbrance that leads me to the opportunity. And as long as I can keep my land investing like ethos of I don't want to go to every proper. I don't want to go to the properties. I don't want to fix up termites, tenants, toilets, blah 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 blah. Right? We bought a property right now. We're selling has the roof caved in. Okay, it's the one that we're making a bunch of money on. The roof, it's not caved in, but it's uninsurable. Okay, so guess what? We just adjusted the purchase price of the
Hmm.
buyer. We didn't fix the roof. We just confirmed it was uninsurable, and then we gave him a discount on the property. And we're still able to make a bunch of money because the roof cost 20 grand, and we were making more than that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, we have done a lot of houses. I think the land, like I love the land deals because I know how to squeeze every dollar out of them. But yeah, we've done plenty of houses and I'm not afraid to admit it.
Good for you, Clint. I love that. I love that. So just for clarification, you're not saying if there's not a land play, I'm not touching it. If there's an opportunity there because of an encumbrance for the deal and the numbers work, you're gonna do that deal.
Yes.
I love it.
50K plus and then a sliding scale on how long is it going to take us? Because here's why I like competition would be funny in this niche because it takes so long. Like every deal, and it's not the cash conversion cycle. The deal I just told you about, where we're going to make almost 200 grand. Okay. It's a house near the border in El Paso, Texas. Who would have known? Okay. But that's where the opportunity was. And what was your question?
The question was, you're not filtering out stuff that doesn't have a land play. If it's a
Oh
deal,
yeah.
it's a deal. Like
If
you're
it's a deal, it's a
okay to
deal.
touch houses. You're not like, hey, listen, I'm Clint Turner from Learn Land, and if it's
No,
not a
no, no,
land
no.
deal,
So I lost my train of thought because I was trying to tell you that deal we're gonna liquidate from first contact to liquidation is like 6 weeks. Have you ever heard of a land deal where you make $200,000 in 6 weeks?
few and far between. And
Maybe, right?
yeah,
But six
but
six weeks is
typically,
pushing it.
yeah,
Six
yeah,
weeks
yeah,
is
yeah.
pushing it, and it's because the problem with land right now is it sells slow, right? A
Hmm.
well-priced house in an area with humans just sell. Like there's a market price for it. There's market
Right.
price and demand at any time, as long as you're at
Yeah.
the right market price. And it's not always like super long play. Sometimes it's figured, but as soon as you figure it out, the second that somebody signs the release or signs the agreement or whatever it is, signs the affidavit that unlocks the property, it's listed. And if it's a house in an area at a great price point, that's going to sell a lot faster than a piece of land. The land plays we can make more value of because I know how to subdivide someone's property and maybe help them because that lady didn't want to move. That was her big thing. Everybody
Mm.
called her and said, "You have to we will offer you XX, but you got to leave." And I said, "No, I'll pay to stop the tax sale, so that pressure's not on your back, and then I'll pay to subdivide the property off, and you have some cash. Your taxes are taken care of, and I get the property at a great basis." She's thrilled. She gets to stay there. She's old. She doesn't use that part of the property. It's just a win.
Yeah.
So land
Yeah.
deals have a lot more creativity, but yeah, I've done a lot of houses. Is what it is.
That's really good. I do have a follow-up question about those houses. You mentioned that the you like to keep your land investing approach to those houses where you're not doing a ton of rehab and things like that. So, can you walk us through what do you do with the house that has a caved in roof, or are you doing anything to it outside of removing the trash and then throwing it back on the MLS?
Nope.
Love it.
Yeah, just I mean, I'm being a little facetious, but yeah, like generally whatever our realtor can handle as a project manager is how I like to think of it. And we have found another bottleneck and thing that is challenging is finding a realtor who like is willing to just go like outside the normal route to get a deal done, or is willing to go show up at a really nasty property to give me a valuation, right? That's an investor friendly realtor. So you got to find the investor friendly realtor. And that's been what has made sales a little harder versus easier for us at times because the investor friendly one's going to say mow the yard, clean everything out, and it's going to show a lot better. And half the time the other one's just not going to take the listing, or they're going to give you all this run around and ring around. So finding the agent's very important if you're not in the market or you don't plan to go to the deals, right? And then it's just an assessment of where is it right now, right? Maybe lipstick on a pig to trash out and mow the yard. Jeremy, my partner, told me the other day, I was giving him the spiel, or I don't know, we were talking about it. And he said, "Oh no, we have done more than that." I was like, "Oh, what do you mean?" He said, "The realtor on this last property, her husband put a vanity in one of the bathrooms because it was missing a vanity. So he went to Home Depot, bought a vanity, and put it in the bathroom. Didn't even plumb it, just put it in there because that looked nice. And
Yeah.
I guess we paid for that, but nothing we did, right? Very simple. And it's just where's it right now in the condition it's currently in? Where's it going to sell in a week or two? That's the evaluation.
Excellent. And so, how are you going about funding these types of deals? Is it all just your capital straight out of pocket? Are you able to get any type of lending on these kinds of properties? What does that look like?
Now I don't think you can get much lending. That's where if you went to the bank. So think about this, okay? Somebody's got a house and they got equity in the house and they get behind on their taxes. Okay. Just go take a home equity line of credit. Get some of the equity out, pay the taxes, kick the can down the road, figure it out, right? That's probably what you're going to do in a pinch. If you have a property that has even something as simple as a memo on title, the lender is going to get a policy against the house. They're going to do a title search. It's not going to have clear title. Now you can't get access to the money.
Mm.
And so now you need an investor like us to come in and put money in to get the deal. So I say all that to say no, they're not very bankable or lendable. In fact, you want to keep it out of the bank title company's eyes until you've done all your work, which makes these deals a little more unique sometimes. Like the industrial deal where we made a big fat check. This was my first big deal in this like sub niche. And I sent this woman like $33,000 just a wire transfer. And she signed a deed. And I bought a third of the property. So I sent her
Wow.
33,000, bought a third of the property, or it's like right around there. Bought a third of the property. She notarized the deed. We didn't go through title. We didn't go through anything else. That's why the property couldn't sell because they had been in title for 18 months and they couldn't get it through. And I said, I'll give you cash by Friday. And she said, and I gave her cash by Friday. And then she told everybody else in the family, hey, he gave me cash. Let's get this thing done. And yeah, it's really just like figuring, like meeting people where they are, understanding what the challenge is, and creating a solution that goes, that can help them get. Generally, it's like liquidation of the asset, but accomplish their goals.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. You mentioned earlier about that you sort your list by value. Can you give us a little bit more insight about what numbers you like to see in terms of ranges?
Yeah. So for when I'm looking at a list of, let's say, tax delinquents or tax foreclosures, okay, if I'm looking for something where the main encumbrance is taxes, okay? So like I've done deals with people who are behind on taxes. There's a deal right now that I'm doing where I maybe shouldn't say this. I will anyway. It's like slightly regulated. I'm not sure if we're supposed to do it, but I did a joint venture with a guy to pay his taxes and to get a survey so that he could sell off half the property and then pay me back. I told the guy straight up, I don't do these deals unless I can make 100% return on my money. And he said, okay, you don't buy my whole property. Let's do it this way. You give me 50 grand, I'll give you 100 grand back. And I'm secured by a deed of trust and everything I would need on that property. And so when I'm looking for what is, if I'm trying to list, let's say by taxes, in that situation, it was only taxes. That was the encumbrance. So what do you generally need? You need high taxes, right? High taxes owed. If you have something with $4,000 owed and it's only a year or two delinquent, you're going to call someone, they're going to be like, I know I'm behind on it, but I'm going to get it paid or whatever. When you have somebody that's $40,000 behind on taxes, it's less of a, I'm going to call my family and pull something together. It's more of like a, oh, they're going to sell my property if I don't find $40,000 for them. Right.
Hey there, land fans. If you're enjoying this episode and would like to see more episodes like this, please be sure to let us know by liking and subscribing below.
So for
Right.
a tax list, I'd sort it by that. I'd sort it by how much is the property worth and also how much taxes are there. In bonus points, if you can also sort it by, is there somebody who's dead in the mix? Is there like an interest holder who's dead? That gives you the holy grail of we can't get this thing figured out. There's taxes, which means there's a deadline. There's an airship issue, which takes time and money. That's like a bunch of problems with like a hard stop deadline. We're going to lose the property. That's my favorite list right now.
Excellent. Yeah. Really sounds like there's a lot of motivation in that
Yes.
that
Yes.
scenario. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So, speaking of these sellers, can you talk to us about what do those conversations look like? You start doing some initial due diligence. You after you pull your list, you figure, oh, there might be something here. Now I'm going to call them. What does that call look like? I think that most people here know what traditional landowner calls look like, but in these distress situations, can you give us a little bit of a feel of what you say and how do those conversations typically go?
Yeah. So the first thing is they're either like problem aware or they're not problem aware. So if they're fully aware of the problem, then you move into solutions quicker, right? You move into what have you tried? Why hasn't it worked? Why are we talking today? Like, how can I help you? If they're not problem aware, like they don't understand that this property can't sell because it's encumbered, then it's a little more delicate because I have found it is not a good strategy to be like, your property's encumbered, sell it to me right now. That's not how you want to do it. Generally, like they got to figure it out themselves.
Got
And
it.
so I have now switched. If somebody doesn't really understand that the property's encumbered, I want to plant the seed in their mind, and then I want them to go do something that proves to themselves that it's encumbered. They could get a title policy. They could take a cash offer from another buyer. They could do a couple things there, right? I want them to do something that's going to give them the validity of, oh shoot, I got a problem on my hands. And it's going to be
Right.
different depending on every deal, what the problem is. Got to make them problem aware there first. Then you got to make them solution aware. And like, look, sometimes like over half the time, the answer is, hey, you need to go pay the 40 grand and then you need to go hire this lawyer and they're going to do this and it's going to cost this much. And as long as you're good with that, then go do that because that's the best route. That's the best route,
Mm.
right? I'm not the best route at that point. But if they're like, no, can't do that, don't have the time, don't have the money, too much stress, I don't like my ex-husband, whatever it is, then I will take on your problem for you. And so, anyway, yeah, there you go.
That's fantastic. So, whenever you're discussing these properties with the owners and you come to the point where they understand that there's a problem, they want your help to solve the problem, you start moving into the offer phase. How do you figure out how much am I going to offer the seller? How am I going to present this? I'm sure again, it's these are all messy, so I'm sure it's very case by case depending on what they need. But what are some of the best practices that you rely on in these particular types of deals?
Yeah, I think professionalism is a little more important in this niche. A, just having somebody like, we got to get to a point that they trust you and that you're leading them. Because look, sometimes you're asking people to do things that aren't traditional, right? You're like, hey, here's why it won't sell. I will buy it from you, right? I need to send somebody to your house to sign documents, then I'm going to send you a wire transfer. And I'm like, that sounds scammy. So you really got to get them to trust that in the process, right? So once I feel like they trust in the process and they really need our solution, then I'm just trying to make a good deal for us. I'll buy something if it's worth 100,000. I would like to pay 500 or 1,000 for it, but sometimes I got to pay 5 or 10 or 15. I would rarely, like, let's say it's $100,000 and I see a clear path to exit and I am confident in our position. I'd probably put in 50 or 75,000 to make the 100, right? And maybe it depends. If it's that house where I'm like, dude, these people are divorced, it's vacant, it's clean. Like, as soon as I sign the docs, I'm going to list it, right? That even brings another question of can you wholesale it into play? So there's every deal is going to look a little different. But once we're good to go in the solution, and they know I'm going to solve it, they want to do business with me, then I'm just trying to make a good deal. And so we're spending a decent amount of time on calls with people anchoring them where they're at so that when they get the 15 cents on the dollar offer, they understand why it is that, right?
Mm, yeah,
And oftentimes it looks like this: family, 6 people, hey, we'll pay you 30 grand, right? And y'all got to split the 30 grand up and tell us it's worth 60 or 90 or something like that. And we're going to go solve the problem to make that yield, right?
yeah, that's really good. So, in looking at competition with this particular approach, it does sound like it's way more of a blue ocean. We've talked about several reasons why that is, but talk to us a little bit more about what keeps it that way. Like, why aren't there people automating things and systemizing things? Can you talk to us what that looks like from your perspective?
Yes. I don't know. I'm actually like genuinely curious myself. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity in this space.
Yeah.
That list we just talked about, so tax foreclosure lawsuit, deceased party or individual named in the lawsuit, high taxes, high property value. I would love to pay for that, right? Somebody would give me that list, I'd pay for it. Nobody will give me that. Nobody has that list. It's because the data is chunky. not formatted properly, hard to get access to, and hard to put together in a way that you can be like, yeah, that's the one, right?
Mm,
AI has made it a lot easier. So if you go from a very programmatic view of it, would have been very hard to do that, to put that list together with a, they call it deterministic programming. If they click this button, it does this thing, right? Where AI, on the other hand, thinks for you and like reasons and does things of that nature. And so we were able to collect the data from all these different places and then feed it through an AI query algorithm, whatever you call it, that we built. And it spits back the ones that have all the things we want. Right. So now it's just a race to see how can we format all the data and get it in there. But that's one niche, right? That's one type of encumbrance, right? Is like the tax airship combo. And then you start layering in mortgage defaults on top of that or alongside it. Something we're really interested in now is layering divorces in, right? Because
mm,
divorces run through the court dockets. And this is the whole thing. This is the secret sauce. Maybe I'm giving it all away. I don't know.
here we
Um,
go.
the reason that I think this wasn't possible before is because court dockets are like a bunch of PDFs. So you got to get all the PDFs and then process all the PDFs and pull like random little stuff out of it.
Mm,
Parcel ID, how much taxes they owe, who's on the lawsuit, when was it filed, all that stuff, right? But a lot of the details in the PDF files. And for Harris County, if you get every tax open tax lawsuit, I think you probably have 100,000 plus PDFs, right? So we need a way that somebody can read all those PDFs and pull out the important information. And it's not all going to be formatted the same because it's a different attorney that does them. It's not uniform. There's no easy way to say, pull out this number. It's just PDF. It's got to read it and find the number. But we were able to feed it all into an AI API. I guess that's what you call it. And for a few $100s, we could analyze all of those PDFs and hit like a 85% return rate on getting the data we want out of it. And so that combined with like data tree and just your normal avenues, we're able to create a very targeted list. And I'm not like a genius programmer by any means. This was just like this opportunity was there. And then I start thinking about mortgage, I start thinking about bankruptcies and divorces and all this other stuff you can layer in. And I like you look, there's no solution that I have found for it. So it's got me really excited because I'm like, man, I've got like a couple developers I pay a couple $1,000s a month to live in Latin America. They're just working on this thing all day. And it's super exciting because it's surfacing a lot of really great opportunities. But the bottleneck's time. Like this is why this thing will never scale and there will always be opportunities. Is like our team, we've been doing this for about 18 months now. We have finally gotten to the point where we will not just run at 100, like the RPM meter all the way to the left, right? We will say no to deals without one in the pipeline because we know there's so many opportunities we could go prospect against.
mm.
That's hard to do. We didn't do that for a long time and we did a lot of like brain damage deals, hard, like a lot of work to make 20 grand.
Yeah,
But hey, if you're getting started, like working hard to make 20 grand isn't a bad deal either.
yeah,
So it's time. Time is the bottleneck. Time is why this thing is like, there's all these opportunities because that's very niche, right? Like I could maybe sell that data to a couple people listening to this, but I can't go market on Google for that. Nobody cares. It's a very niche sub concept.
yeah,
And so I think there's like just not a lot of like marketplace capital that drives somebody to go and build an AI app that analyzes the court dockets.
yeah, yeah.
So I, it's a good question why there's so much opportunity. It takes a lot of time and it's not super straightforward.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So let me ask you this, Clint. We've talked now for almost about an hour of all of the sort of like little details and nuances and different encumbrance combinations that can be layered. And obviously, it can be as complex as you want to make it. Can you give our listeners a step by step, blow by blow of the major sort of anchor points whenever you're looking to, okay, I'm looking for a tax list, I'm trying to build my list for who I'm going to reach out to. So can you give us like the overview steps of that? Like I go here first, then I do this, then I do this, then I do this.
Yeah, like steps to create a list.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can go with something that doesn't have 400 different types of
Yeah.
encumbrances. You can just go
It's
for the
just
simple one.
you start with one. And so I told you Harris County at the beginning of the podcast. I
Mhm.
would go to I Google search Harris County public record search. Okay. Boom. Now we're on that page. All right. You can filter by tax lawsuits. You can filter by year. And so you could start with that right there. Right. Boom. I have tax lawsuits. I would look at a little bit older lawsuits. That generally means they're farther along. Got to be more motivation. Look at tax lawsuits filed in 2023. There you go. Right. Now you have a list. That's a list you can work through. If you want to start layering in, okay, I want those where somebody's dead, right? Where there's a dead person on the deed. We're going to have a little bit of savviness to take that list and work with another list provider to see if they're dead, if there's dead people on the deed or not, or to, yeah, exactly, to find out if the list is dead. But that's another layer that you could put in there, right?
Mm.
You could do tax delinquent list, which I have found to be very challenging to find. Um, Counties are getting like a lot less they're a lot less interested in giving out public landowners information. Is it freedom of information? We don't know. There's not clear case law on it. But finding the delinquent tax list is easy in some places, but in most places they just don't give it to you. And maybe you can sweet talk them, but um, tax foreclosure lawsuits are public domain, they're public record, and they're going to be in the docket or in the record search for the city or county that it's in. So you could go there and start. Another thing you could do is you could go to data tree and you could take an area, say there's 1,000 leads, download the leads, upload it to direct skip. Yeah, direct skip. They have a deceased filter, however many cents per line, right? He goes down and tells you if they're deceased. You're going to get a couple percent hit rate. There's a list for you. Yeah, it's basically choose an encumbrance. Like another one I just told you about earlier, I'm very interested in is, can I go find all the land records of deed restrictions in an area that are limiting a property's value? So what would I do? I'd go to the public land record search and I'd search for restrictions, or sometimes they're called declarations. I'd search for declarations. And I'd look at them and I'd look at the properties. It's not like there's not a magic button that's easy. It's,
Right.
hey, all the opportunity is right in front of you. Dude, the deal that I made the most money on, it had it was in tax foreclosure suit since 2018. It had been sitting on the county docket for 6 years and had been sitting on a mainstream website of foreclosures for 2 years. And a couple investors came in and couldn't get the deal done, and we just stuck with it till we did, right? Might
Wow.
just be hard headedness, but I'm confident that you can solve all the problems, right?
Yeah.
It's a fundamental right to use the land you own in the United States. How do you own land? You buy the deeds, right? There's a path.
Yep.
It's when it comes to putting the list together, it is choosing the encumbrance you want and searching for it. And in most cases, it's hard. It's not easy, right? But that's why I told you Harris County, because it is pretty easy in Harris
Yeah.
County.
So once you have that list, you mentioned you have to go through the court documents, like these PDFs now. So where does that come in? Once you have the list, then what do you do with that list? Do you now go search for the court documents, or what does that look like? What are my next steps on
Sure.
this?
Okay. I get to a list of tax lawsuits. Okay.
Mhm.
We need to figure out who's in the lawsuit. So whoever's being sued is generally the property owner. Although the attorneys that represent these counties really bad at their job. So almost every single time they miss somebody or they miss a lot of people.
Interesting.
But if you think about it, hey, I have to sue you so that I can sell your property to pay your taxes. They're going to sue the owner of the property, right? So
Right?
we're going to pull the parties out of the lawsuit. And those are the people we need to start. So then I'm going to skip trace them. I'm going to use a direct skip. If you can get access to a software like TLO or Clear, they're like law enforcement grade skip tracing. Hard to get access to, but you can definitely do it. And a lot of private investigators have access to them. So you can just say, do you have access to TLO? Here's $30 and you just search these three people for me, right? There's ways to do that. But then you got to find them. You got to skip trace them. You got to call them and you got to ask them, hey, this came across my desk. I see that your property is being foreclosed on currently. Do you have a plan for it? Did you need some help? And then they're either going to say, got it taken care of. Oh, great. I saw it's been on the docket for a year. It looks like it's going to go to sales soon. So you start talking to them and engaging and opening, just trying to understand the situation. And just like anything, just like land investing, just like flipping houses, just like doing an industrial deal, just like pretty much any business, the first time you do it, you're not great. And the second time, you're a little better. And then the 100th time, you got to figure it out. Right.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. That's great. I love this. I love how creative it is. And Clint, I really had no idea that you were doing houses too. That's fantastic. I love it. So cool. So I want to thank you for being so generous with your time and with your information. This is very exciting stuff. I know it's very it can be complex and nuanced. And so thank you for taking the time to talk through all of these things with us. How can we give back to you right now? What types of connections or resources are you currently looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, we started a podcast about these deals. It's called A Messy Million. So you can just search that on the Spotify platforms or on, excuse me, on all the platforms. It should be there where we're just talking about all these deals. Like we've done 40 something odd deals over the last year. Every single one of them has a crazy, unique story. And so we're just telling the stories in every episode. The first episode will sound a lot like this podcast. You can hop to the second episode if you want to listen to the deals. So you can check that out. You can follow it, leave a review. We'd appreciate that. Leave a comment or whatever happens on those. And
Yeah.
then if you want to learn more about what we're doing, specifically the list that I was talking about, where we're finding deals through court dockets and smushing all this data together to find an outbound strategy. Kendall, we didn't even talk about the pay per click. There's so much more to talk about.
We'll have to have you back on for a part two.
Okay, we'll have to.
We'll
But
do
if you
it.
want to
We'll
hear
do it.
about that, if you want to hear about these kind of deals we're working on January 23rd, I'm doing a 2 hour class like this where I'm going to be going up. If you like this kind of value, you'll like that kind of class. I only do these things once or twice a year because I put like way too much time and energy into them. So that's January 23rd. It's free. You can just go to our website. It's learn.land. If you're wondering what I'll sell you data later if you want it. Okay. But if you want to just learn about what we're doing, I want to unpack it all 2 hours just on the screen showing you how it works. So check out our podcast, check out our website.
Amazing. We'll definitely put those links in the show notes. If you're listening to this and you want to check out Clint's free masterclass on January 23rd, you can go to messytitle.com and that'll take you right to that sign up page. You could check it all out and sign up for that. Thanks so much, Clint. Thank you. This has been incredible. I am so excited to see your web masterclass on January 23rd. I will be there with bells on. I can't wait to hear more about this distressed property approach. I think that you are on to something that we're going to see a huge wave of in the land space with investors that are trying to zig when everyone else is zagging. Very excited. It sounds like there's so much opportunity here. So thank you for coming on and sharing your journey with us. This has been great.
Thanks, Kendall. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, take care, everyone. Be safe out there, stay warm, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye. If you're interested in hearing from other 6 and 7 figure land flippers about how they've built and run their businesses, then check out my group, Only Land Fans, where I do a live interview each week inside the group. You can grab that link at the description below. Until then, be great, have a great week, and catch you in the next one.